Okay, so I'm back. This is part two of the introduction to neurons, picking up where we left off with the synapse. Hope you don't mind. I don't think I need to be visible there. So here's the synapse we're talking about. So what these are vesicles filled with neurotransmitters. A very popular one is called ACH. It's acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is the chemical released at the neuromuscular junction. We have to pretend, though, here in this case, that this would be a muscle and this would be a neuron telling the muscle to contract. This neurotransmitter is called ACH. There's all kinds of neurotransmitters. In the heart, ACH actually is a neurotransmitter that tells it to relax. So different neurotransmitters play different roles in different parts of the body. It just depends on these purple receptors. So these are neurotransmitters that will be released from the end of the axon terminal. And when they bind to their, kind of like a lock and key, when they bind to the receptor, it's like a lock opening a door. You can see this one's closed. You can see this one's closed because no neurotransmitter is there. But as soon as the neurotransmitter binds to it, it unlocks the gate and the gate opens up. Now, not shown in this picture is all the sodium. That is just like you hear sodium chloride, Na, in your diet. So we don't want to misconstrue the information of keep your sodium levels low. Generally, we do have plenty of sodium in our diet, but it's also a good thing because you need sodium. One of the reasons you may feel grumpy when you're not eating is your nervous system doesn't have enough of what it needs. Now, there's really a whole lot of reasons there, but that's one of them. Okay, so there's a flood of sodium that goes in here. Sodium interacts very well. If you happen to be taking my chemical systems course or have taken biology, you know that sodium is an ion that reacts very quickly in aqueous environments and carries with it an electrical charge, and positive electrical charge. All right, let's go with another. That was acetylcholine, for example, tells muscles to contract. Another popular neurotransmitter is dopamine. This could be dopamine that was released. And if so, it'd be to another neuron or in the brain. And as you might be familiar, that's kind of a feel-good neurotransmitter. Now, sometimes, let's just think of mental health here now. Sometimes there's plenty of dopamine, but you don't have these blue receptors, or you don't have very many purple protein channels. Maybe imagine only 2 of these being here. Well, then you're not going to get as much of a response from the cell. So that feel-goodness is not there. You might be lacking the receiver of that good message. You can broadcast on a radio station all the good news you want, but if nobody's listening or has the antenna tuned in or the station tuned into your broadcast, then nobody gets the good news, right? Does that make sense? By analogy, so here, there has to be a receptor here to receive the message. Otherwise, it's for nothing. Cocaine, mental health, was one way this can be thrown off, say with dopamine, is that you don't have enough receptors. Another is drug use. So cocaine is a good example of a drug that mimics this behavior. And so instead of removing, there's a chemical here, there's another enzyme not shown that actually removes the dopamine from this environment. So as soon as it's released, it has its effect, but we don't want to have that effect forever. We can't sustain that naturally, or we should not. We need our various emotions. And so the dopamine is usually taken back up, okay? Well, in the case of drug use, what happens is it blocks the reuptake of these yellow neurotransmitters. And so they stay here longer and you feel better longer, and hence the high. The only problem is your body adapts to that. And so it starts sending out less dopamine and less dopamine and less dopamine and saying, hey, we don't need to send out any more. There's still plenty in the environment. Because why? Because the cocaine or the drug has interfered with the uptake of it. And so the cells sense the presence of dopamine, but that dopamine will not last there forever. And these receptors do get worn out. They get used from time to time, right? But can you imagine if they're constantly being used? That's like anything. Cells wear and tear. That's why look at old age. That's what it is. It's a wear and tear on the body down to the cellular level. And so you need to continue then taking that drug more and more because your body's shutting down dopamine release more and more because it's adapting. It doesn't need to release it. And so you are chasing that initial high, never able to re-achieve it. And you get to that point where sometimes you have to take that just to feel normal. And that's a sad case to be in. You have to go through this purification, the withdrawals and things like that. So neurotransmitters can be pretty powerful, and those are just two examples, and there's a lot at play here. So there's the release and the production of the neurotransmitter, which can be amino acid or protein based. As I said, with the acetylcholine and with the dopamine, both of those are protein or amino acid based. So you want to make sure you have plenty of protein in your diet because it's something that is made using those amino acids. Now, these membranes are made of lipids. And that myelin sheath I talked about in the previous lecture that allows the neuron to fire 150 times faster, that's made of cholesterol and lipid membrane. So again, fats for cells are important. Hopefully the good fats though, not the LDL, but the HDL, the high density lipoprotein, as we learned in the fat reading. And then what else here did I want to say? Oh, to send this message. So this has been an electrical message coming down until this point. It turned into a chemical message. So this electrical message is able to be transmitted chemically to the next cell because of something else not shown here, and that is calcium. Calcium is what signals the axon terminal to release the neurotransmitter. I'll say it again. Calcium and sometimes chlorine, but typically calcium is a ion present, just like sodium, not shown because it would flood this picture, that tells the cell to release these neurotransmitters. So calcium, sodium, proteins, lipids, all these are things for which are reasons you need to eat. Okay. All right, moving forward now, changing subject just a bit. Nervous and endocrine systems. Central nervous system includes the brain and spinal cord. Brain is the body's main processing center, coordinating efforts to maintain homeostasis. That is, whatever the environment is, the proper pH, the proper temperature, proper hydration, make you pee more, make you pee less to maintain the water balance, make you thirsty or not want to drink. All these are behaviors mitigated by homeostasis and the brain regulating what's going on here. So just to go through the brain anatomy, you have the cerebrum. That's the largest, most prominent region. Put your hand on top of your head, you're feeling your cerebrum. This controls voluntary or conscious activities of the body. So in other words, this is your thought process in everything from your thumb. You might have seen Homunculus Man. If you haven't, I will show you that picture real quickly. It's this idea. Oh, come on. It's not typing. There we go. You got a weird kind of. So if your body, and here's the idea, I like this picture. If your body was proportioned according to the amount of brain space devoted to it, then you would look like this guy. All right. Meaning you have lots and lots of neurons for feeling with your hands. Okay. And you have lots and lots of neurons around your lips and your tongue. Think about, of course, kissing, right? Very sensitive, very personal matter. Look at the ears. Of course, the face has a lot. So this is supposed to represent Homunculus Man. Again, this picture. This is a bigger one. So if we look at, this is a cross-section of the brain right here. This is the outer about centimeter or two. And this is what we've seen in brain surgery. If we touch this part, we move your leg. If we poke this part, you have a sensation in your elbow. So part of this, and that's what this one is showing, a part of this is for reception, and a part of it is for motor activity. So if you look right here, and this is right on top of your head, right across from ear to ear, pretty much just behind your ear to just behind your other ear. That's where you are receiving messages for all these parts of your body. And if you go to that inch just in front of that, so just to the front of one ear, across the top of your head to the other front of the other ear, that's your motor cortex. And that's where you send messages back to that part of your body. So you feel a bug crawling across your forehead in your left part of your brain here, in the back part of your brain here, and right next to it sends a message, hey, slap your face. And over here is where you slap your face. Ow. And you get that bug on your forehead. Okay. So anyway, so all motor sensory information and such is here. Let me see. Let me get this back up here. So this is a voluntary movement. You can feel it. You can control it. And then there's the cerebellum. It's the second largest region. It's at the back of the skull. Best place I think of is boxing. MMA fighting, you're not allowed to hit in the back of the head. When someone slips and falls and lands on the back of their head, that's the most dangerous because that's the most sensitive to balance. You see the butterflies, the sparkling lights, you lose your balance, you get up a little woozy. And that's because the cerebellum coordinates balance, the actions of muscles. Your head, the part we just talked about, might control muscle movement or send a message to your muscles to move, but it's the cerebellum here that actually will coordinate how graceful and efficient you are. So you think about the table in front of you or sofa in front of you and move right up to it without touching it. You get about an inch away, now get a little closer, get a little closer, and now touch, and you did it. All right, so you're able to judge distance and balance and how you position yourself when you sit and stand. That's all the coordination effort of the cerebellum. Brainstem, sometimes referred to as the medulla oblongata, is more than just the MO. It's also the pons and midbrain. And so here, this is the most basic and fundamental and the most protected portion of your brain. It's right in here, right above the end of your spinal cord. And this regulates the flow of information between the brain and the rest of the body. You have to get hit really hard in the head, but some people have, and it knocks them out, kind of a bleep, and then you come back online after a little while. You're talking about getting hit with the bat, maybe falling off a horse or running into a tree, falling on the front of your head, getting hit in the front of your head. And the front of your skull is one of the hardest, and you can withstand it. But being hit in the cerebellum or in the hard enough to damage the brainstem, you're talking about blood pressure, heart rate, breathing, swallowing, of course, some car accidents, some whiplash, things like that can damage this center part of the brain that regulates and controls life, vital to life functions here, okay? This is also called the primitive brain. It's what we share in common to some degree with all animals, because all animals have to have blood pressure, heart rate, breathing, swallowing, and so forth, and communication between your body and the brain. But the cerebellum has various sizes depending on what kind of animal it is, as well as then the cerebrum. Okay. All again, just in consideration of not only neurological disorders, but also mental health. So thalamus, I've already referred to the thalamus without saying it by name. So look at what it does. Between the brainstem and the cerebrum, what did we just say the brainstem is? A highway, a relay station, also controlling blood pressure, breathing, heart, monitoring it. And what is the cerebrum? Everything you consciously know. You have the choice. You feel it with your body, and you send messages back out. But the front of your cerebrum, you think and you feel. So thalamus is between those parts, between these two. So it receives messages from sense organs and it relays it. And again, it's the thalamus that I was referring to that will decide whether you need to know anything. It's like the hub. Messages will come to it, and if you need to know about it, you will. Anything you're conscious about is because your thalamus allowed you to be conscious about it. Hypothalamus. I know, that sounds pretty weird, doesn't it? Hypothalamus is, like the name suggests, right below it. Hypo means below. So it's located between the brainstem and the cerebrum as well, because it's just the lower stem of the thalamus, and it's the control center for recognizing and analyzing things like hunger, thirst, anger, fatigue, body temperature, and many other things. all the biological functions and natural drives of life, to drive to sleep, the drive to reproduce. All these are mitigated to some part by the hypothalamus, which controls via hormones in the pituitary gland, all these things. Okay, your basal metabolic rate, your BMA, emotion, hypothalamus. This is very important. Structure of the human brain. So I've been talking about these things. Now let's see about where they are. Again, this large portion right here, the largest part of your brain is the cerebrum. This frontal lobe is where we think it's one of the last ones to develop. Okay, usually till about age 21 to 25. It's not fully developed until about 21, 25. Think about your drinking laws. You have to be at least 21 to drink. Think about insurance and insurance risk. If you remember paying for insurance, you didn't get a break in your insurance costs till you were 25. After 25, I guess they consider you a well-developed and your decision-making should be better. Otherwise, you're a risk. So, you know, there's some science behind why laws are what they are. But this is that thinking and processing and critical thinking part of your brain. Here again is your body, where you feel and where you send messages from to respond to the outer environment, which is in response often just to what you see and hear, a train or a car coming. You can make these decisions back here, and the relays up, and then you come right back down and make the movement in response to something you see happening. We didn't talk much about the corpus callosum. It is very important, though. You have a lot of emotion and memory in here, okay, from all times of your life for various reasons. But what I do want to talk about is right here, this thalamus. So here's the thalamus, the nuclei. So messages come up the spinal cord into the brain stem. First, the medulla oblongata, and you have respiratory and heartbeat regulation here. The pons, some emotion and some regulation as well of breathing. And then the midbrain. And at this point stops, and this is the hub. Everything comes up to here and then branches out to whatever part of the brain it needs to go. And the thalamus knows what those directions are. And the cerebellum is this back portion. Again, no rabbit punches, fall in the back of your head right there. Knocked out, can be unconscious. Depending, you lose balance and coordination. Dangerous part of the head. All right. Let me see my time here. Well, it's not going to show me my time. All right. So this kind of transitions. Rather than doing a third lecture, I think I'll just make this one a little longer. So 5 general categories of sensory receptors that tell you a little of the insights of the world around you are located in various parts of your body, both internal and external, but most of them in your skin. You have pain receptors, thermoreceptors for temperature, mechanoreceptors, mechanical movement, chemoreceptors help with the pH in your body remain balanced, and photoreceptors. This helps us set the biological clock for knowing day or night, when that sun sets and rises and becoming sleepy or not. Interesting that there are no spicy receptors. There are no sweet receptors here. Some of those belong in the taste buds, but those receptors are basically a mixture of pain and sensory. So these next slides go through just a little bit of the detail of where they are located and what their function is for the body. You can read through these. There are some anecdotal stories that would be pretty neat to hear, but I don't want to keep this lecture so long. Yeah, I was going to say about saliva. You have to have moist membranes to smell, and moist both in your nose and in your mouth if you want to really get the best effect out of your food. All right, motor neurons. Again, think of motor, think of movement. Motors make cars move, make your body move. Motor skills, those are the neurons that make your body move. So last bit I'll explain is autonomic and somatic. Okay, so auto means self. They guide themselves. Autonomic nervous system is that part of your brain that controls everything in your body that you're unconscious about. Okay, so you don't know what's going on here until, again, your thalamus decides to let you know. So autonomic are things that are regulated. Your digestion, you have no choice. Once you swallow the food, You have no choice what happens to it after that. It's all autonomic nervous system. When a dog barks, somebody screams in the distance, gunshot, all those things. I got a visitor. It's regulated by the autonomic nervous system. Okay, my visitor there real quick. So the second one is the other part of the nervous system, divided again into two parts: autonomic, meaning controls itself about your conscious control, and then somatic. The root of soma, like auto means self, but soma means body. I'm not sure why I chose these. Ik, I see, that prefix or suffix, means pertaining to. So this pertains to controlling itself. This means pertaining to controlling the body. And you have control of the body, somatic nervous system. So the rest of these slides basically are defining parts of your physiology, nervous physiology, that are under autonomic control, and then under somatic control, which is voluntary, for the most part, voluntary. All right. The last few slides is the other system that helps to control and regulate your body. It's mostly the nervous system, but it is in conjunction often with, so it's called sometimes the neuroendocrine system. There's a real close interplay between, just like, let's say, remember the neurotransmitters of the axons? Those neurotransmitters belong in part to the endocrine system as well. They're hormones oftentimes. So when we think about normal physiology, these are things that happen. And whenever we have abnormal physiology, whether it be self or somatic, and usually it's somatic, there can be disease that you're born with. It can be inherited, genetic. It can be offset by environmental. It could be traumatic by the events like PTSD. And so we need some help controlling those, just like any other system that might go sick. Your liver is overworked, cirrhosis or hepatitis, or due to whatever, your lungs. So the environment can pollute our lungs. The environment can pollute our liver, depending on what we consume. And sometimes the things that happen in our environment around us that we see and hear, can also trigger various responses. And so these are categorized in as mental, emotional illnesses. And that's what you'll be working on this week as well, and then mostly tomorrow, Thursday. Got a review for basic biology today. But just a quick overview of the endocrine system: glands that release their products, namely hormones, into the bloodstream. And these hormones are chemical messengers, just like neurotransmitters. All right, so everything from regulating your metabolism. If you've ever heard that you have a slow metabolism or a fast metabolism, that can have an effect on your weight and how much you eat, whether you eat a lot or little. The endocrine system also helps to maintain salt-water balance, nutrient balance in the blood, antidiuretic. Many of us are familiar with antidiuretics or diuretics in order to cause us to lose water. If you have high blood pressure, you're given pills that help you to urinate or get rid of excess water when it builds up. It controls body's responses to stress. Cortisol, adrenaline, the fight or flight reaction is part of the endocrine system. So people who have a tough time controlling some of those emotions and they don't have any, they feel like they have no control over the thoughts or the things that come into their head, maybe see an endocrinologist. Sometimes it's physiologically and such. Regulates growth, development, reproduction. These are major life things here. Everything in balance. This is a very significant slide. I talked about this in the first week of class, homeostasis. And this is showing us a negative feedback system. Okay, so some specific body condition occurs, it gets too high. Sensory neurons, autonomic, will respond by relaying that message to the brain, and the brain will send a response that will try to change that body condition, try to lower it. If it falls too low, that's another stimulus for change. Sensory neurons send that to the brain. The brain then sends that or relays that through the somatic or autonomic nervous system back to the body to try to raise it. And it's just there's never a time where it is not sending a message, okay? This is constant monitoring. So there could be a gland that receives a signal or is influenced, lower the body condition, the gland that responds by secreting a hormone to raise it. Perfect example here. Sorry about this bar. I'm waiting for that bar on the bottom to go away. There it is. Perfect example here is your blood sugar. So if your blood sugar goes too high, that's going to stimulate your pancreas gland, isolates of Langerhans. That will secrete the hormone insulin. Insulin will tell the body, hey, take up sugar. So all the cells will take up sugar from the blood so that the blood sugar will go down, and you lower the blood sugar. That's what's important, because it can really get dangerous in head if you have diabetes and your blood sugar gets too high. If it drops too low, you get shaky and other things happen, then your pancreas senses that as well and sends out a different hormone called glucagon. Glucagon then goes to your liver, tells it to release glycogen or sugar or carbohydrate or fat reserves and tries to raise the body's blood sugar so that the cells and tissue can get enough sugar in them. Okay, and so this way, through insulin and glucagon, both secreted by the gland pancreas, will help to control the body condition of blood sugar. And this is what you call homeostasis. This is a negative feedback mechanism. Here are some other glands that respond. So here's your pancreas that I was just talking about. The adrenal glands sit on top of your kidneys, and the fight or flight mechanism is regulated right here. Thirst, in part, is regulated here. Blood pressure, in part, is also regulated here. So the adrenal gland, very important. We know what the ovary and testes do. They produce the gametes, sperm and eggs, as well as secondary sex characteristics can be given off by the gonads. So this would be during puberty, of course, developing the Adam's apple for a deeper voice, the broader shoulders versus the broader hips, softer voice, the hair pattern. Thymus has immune function. Thyroid, the parathyroid glands, metabolic, temperature, a lot of things actually regulated by thyroid. Parathyroid, we talked about this indirectly back when we covered the skeletal system. The parathyroid and the thyroid together actually help control bone density by either telling the bones to take up calcium or to release calcium. Isn't that crazy? It's one of the lesser functions of the thyroid, but it is the only function of the parathyroid gland. That is calcium absorption and reabsorption into the blood. And then up here we have the hypothalamus. As we saw earlier, all the biological controls. And hypothalamus often does not regulate everything from up here. He has a right-hand man called pituitary gland, master gland. And so hypothalamus controls pituitary gland to some degree, and it's the pituitary gland that in turn controls the thymus, the adrenal glands, and the gamete, or the gonads. Pancreas, not so much. It's kind of self-regulated. Same thing with the thymus. So this slide will take you through some of these glands and some of the hormones that each of those glands release. And just like if any of these glands are malfunctioning or have a tumor or is not producing correctly the amount of hormone it's supposed to, you will not have a correct response to the environment. And that would then be a cause for needing medication. Right. So I'll spare you because I'm not going to hold you responsible for this. This is an excellent little lecture for how hypothalamus makes the hormones, stores them in the pituitary, and pituitary releases under control. But it gets pretty difficult and thick. I'm going to be happy with just the things that we do with the rest. But do kind of just for fun, for your FYI information under body regulation, see how the nervous system and the endocrine system work together right here. Here you have a nervous, the hypothalamus is in the brain, and here you have an endocrine. This is a gland. So here, right next to each other, right in the middle, little punching bag-like thing, is the back of the head on the head. This is where the neuroendocrine come together very closely to regulate your body. Okay, I think I've taken well enough of the time. That's been an introduction to the nervous system. Have a nice day.